The sky was no longer blue. It turned into a crimson dome, heavy and trembling as if it wanted to crush the earth below. From the horizon, a roar erupted, so loud, so violent, it felt like the cry of some imprisoned beast tearing its way out of the underworld. Aaron froze in his tracks. His chest tightened as if a giant's fist had closed around his lungs. He was a hunter, a father, a man who had fought wolves with bare hands, but he had never heard anything like this. His son screamed in his wife's arms. The boy's wails mixed with the terrified cries of the tribe as they turned their faces upward. And then they saw it. The mountain split. With a deafening blast, the volcano erupted, hurling fire into the sky. Ash, stone, and molten earth spewed upward like rivers of flame defying gravity. For a heartbeat, the sky itself seemed to be on fire. And then came the darkness. The ash cloud swallowed the sun. Shadows fell across the land in an instant, as if day had turned to night. People ran in every direction, their voices cracking in panic. Some tripped and vanished beneath falling boulders. Others were struck by chunks of blazing rock that rained from the heavens like punishment from angry gods. "Run!" Aaron shouted, his voice tearing through the chaos. He grabbed his wife Sira's hand and pulled her toward the tree line. Behind them, the rest of the tribe screamed. A child fell. His mother tried to lift him, but a molten stone struck her back. Her body ignited in an instant, turning her into a torch of agony. Her scream pierced the air, and then silence. The earth shook violently. Trees swayed, the ground split open, and smoke hissed from the cracks. The air reeked of sulfur and death. Aaron's heart pounded as he ran, clutching his son's tiny arm. He dared not look back, but he could hear it, the roar of the volcano, the thunder of destruction chasing them, the last breaths of his people swallowed by fire. For generations, their tribe had lived in the shadow of this mountain. They had worshipped it, feared it, offered it gifts of meat and bone. But now the mountain had decided. The gods no longer wanted them alive. Hours later, though it felt like eternity, they staggered into a narrow canyon. Darkness hung thick as pitch, lit only by glowing embers drifting in the air like sparks from some hellish forge. The screams of their people were gone. The wind howled, carrying with it the stench of burned flesh. Aaron looked around. 15 survivors. That was all. The rest, hundreds of men, women, and children, had been erased in less than a day. Sira clutched their son tightly, her lips pale, her eyes glassy with shock. Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. His voice was rough but steady. "We live," he said. "As long as we live, the tribe still exists." But deep inside, he knew the truth, the endless gray. The survivors huddled in the canyon, coughing from the bitter air, shivering in the cold that followed the fire. No one spoke for a long time. Words seemed too fragile in the face of such ruin. Finally, the old woman Lyra broke the silence. Her face was blackened with ash, her eyes hollow. She whispered, "The gods have turned away from us. We are cursed." Her words cut deeper than the cold. Murmurs spread. Heads bowed. Some began to weep quietly. Others clawed at the ground in despair. Aaron clenched his jaw. He could not allow despair to consume them, not now. He stood, his figure outlined by the faint glow of dying embers. "No," he said firmly. "The gods did not choose this. The mountain did what mountains do. Fire lives inside it, and fire escaped. That is all." His voice carried, steady and sharp, pushing back the whispers. The survivors looked up at him, hunters, mothers, children, even the wounded, all searching his face for strength. "We cannot stay here," Aaron continued. "The air will kill us. The beasts will come. We must move. We must find new land far from the mountain. A murmur of protest rippled through the group. Some wanted to stay, to cling to the canyon, to hope the ash would clear. But Iran knew. He had seen enough winters, enough hunts, enough deaths. If they lingered, they would join the rest of their tribe in the ashes. Sira's hand found his. Her grip was trembling, but her eyes were fierce. "I will follow," she whispered. He looked at her, then at their child, asleep in her arms despite the choking air. And in that moment he understood his role was no longer just to hunt or to fight. His role was to carry life itself forward. For the rest of the night no one slept. The wind moaned through the canyon, carrying sparks of ash. In the distance, the volcano still rumbled, reminding them that death had not finished its work. When dawn finally came, or what should have been dawn, the sky remained black. The sun was gone, buried beneath layers of smoke. The world was colder, quieter, emptier. 15 souls rose from the canyon. 15 survivors of a people who once numbered in the hundreds. They walked, not knowing where, only knowing they could not remain. Behind them, the mountains still spat smoke. Ahead of them, nothing but darkness. And in that darkness, the last tribe on earth began their journey. The survivors walked until their legs trembled and their throats burned. The ash hung in the air like a curse, falling in slow, endless flakes that clung to their skin and hair, turning them into living ghosts. Every breath scraped at their lungs. They had no destination. They only a son's hair back, brushing away the ash. The boy's face was pale, his lips cracked. Sira pressed the child to her chest, her eyes pleading for something Aaron did not have: food, water, safety. The others gathered around, 15 survivors reduced to shadows. Lyra, the old woman, sat on a stone, her back hunched, her gaze empty. Next to her, Jarek, the strongest hunter after Aaron, paced back and forth like a caged wolf. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders rigid. "We cannot keep wandering," Jarek growled. "The ash will choke us before we find anything. We should go back to the canyon. At least there we can hide." "Hide and starve?" Aaron snapped. "The canyon is death. The air is worse there than here. You saw it, you smelled it." Jarek's eyes burned. "And where do you propose we go, Aaron? To the south, where beasts wait in the forests? To the north, where ice swallows men whole? There is nowhere safe." Aaron felt the weight of every eye upon him. They were all waiting, hoping, fearing for him to answer. He swallowed. "We go east," he said. "Away from the mountain, toward the rivers. If the water still flows, there will be life." A murmur rose among the survivors. Some nodded, clinging to the word life like a lifeline. Others shook their heads, fear tightening their faces. "We don't even know if the rivers still exist," Jarek barked. "You ask us to march into nothing." Aaron stepped forward, closing the distance between them until they stood face to face. The air crackled with tension. "And what would you do?" Aaron demanded. "Wait in the canyon for the mountain to finish what it started? Sit among the ashes and hope the gods take pity?" Jarek bared his teeth. "Better die with ground under our feet than to march our children into emptiness." The boy in Sira's arms stirred, whimpering softly. Aaron's chest tightened. He could not allow this fracture to grow. Not now. "We will not die," he said, his voice cutting through the rising argument. "Not while I breathe. Not while I carry my son. We will move east. Those who wish to live will follow." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Sira stepped to his side. "I will follow," she said. One by one, the others made their choice. Most drifted behind Aaron, their faces etched with exhaustion but fueled by the ember of survival. A few remained close to Jarek, uncertain, torn between fear and hope. By nightfall, the tribe was no longer one. A fracture had opened, subtle but dangerous. The fire of division had begun to burn. They set out at dawn, or what passed for dawn beneath the veil of ash. The air was colder, sharper, the kind of cold that cut into bone. The group trudged eastward. Every step was agony, but the thought of rivers, of water and game kept them moving. Children stumbled, carried when they could no longer walk. The hunters took 2 days they wandered. Their food dwindled. Scraps of dried meat, a handful of berries gathered before the eruption. Water was scarcer still. They licked frost from stones, collected ash-covered snow, anything to moisten their throats. On the 3rd night, hunger became unbearable. They huddled in a shallow cave, the air thick with despair. A small fire crackled weakly in the center, more smoke than flame. Around it, hollow faces stared into the dark. The boy whimpered again. Sira rocked him, her lips pressed to his forehead, her own stomach gnawing with emptiness. Aaron stared into the flames, mind racing. If he could not find food soon, the tribe would wither. His son would wither. A sudden sound cut through the silence, bones snapping, meat tearing. Aaron turned. In the shadows, Jarek crouched over something, his shoulders hunched. The sound was unmistakable. Chewing, ripping, devouring. Aaron rose slowly, every muscle tense. "What are you eating?" Jarek's head snapped up. His face was smeared with blood, his eyes wild. In his hands was the leg of something small, too small. Aaron's stomach dropped. It was the body of a child. Gasps echoed in the cave. Mothers clutched their children closer, horror twisting their faces. Lyra began to wail softly, rocking back and forth. "You monster," Sira whispered, her voice trembling. Jarek stood, his chest heaving. "The child was already dead," he roared. "Frost took him last night. Would you rather let him rot while we starve? Would you let his death be wasted?" Aaron's fists clenched. Rage surged through him, hot and merciless. He wanted to kill Jarek where he stood, to end this madness before it spread, but another voice whispered in his mind, cold, cruel, undeniable. "Hunger is stronger than disgust, and soon others may follow him." He stepped forward, his voice shaking with fury. "Never again. Do you hear me? We are not beasts. We do not devour our own." Jarek sneered, blood dripping from his chin. "You call me beast, but when your boy cries from hunger, what will you do? Starve, or take what the dead can still give?" Aaron raised his spear, the tip trembling inches from Jarek's throat. The cave held its breath. At last, Jarek lowered his gaze. He dropped the child's leg into the fire, where the flames hissed as they licked the flesh. The smell of burning meat filled the cave, making stomachs churn, but the damage was done. The tribe was no longer bound by trust. Something darker had entered their hearts, something that would not leave. That survivors moved through this desolation in silence. Every footstep sank into the ash, leaving shallow prints that the wind erased moments later. It was as if the land wanted no memory of them, as if it rejected their presence. Euron carried his son across his shoulders, the boy too weak to walk. His breaths were shallow, his face slack with exhaustion. Every so often, Euron pressed his ear to the child's chest, just to hear the faint rhythm of his heart. Each beat was a victory. Each beat was a warning. Behind him, Sira stumbled, her hand dragging along the jagged bark of a dead tree for balance. Her lips were cracked, bleeding, but when Euron turned to steady her, she shook her head, forcing herself to stand tall. Jarek walked apart from the group, his eyes shadowed, his face unreadable. Since the night in the cave, no one spoke to him. Mothers pulled their children close whenever he came near. Yet no one dared cast him out. He was strong, and strength meant survival. The days blurred into one another. Hunger hollowed them, their skins stretched tight across their bones. The fire within their bellies had turned to knives, stabbing with each step. On the 5th day of their march, they found a carcass. It lay sprawled across the plain, half buried in ash, a deer, ribs jutting out like a broken cage. The meat was rancid, crawling with maggots. The smell was foul enough to twist their stomachs. And yet, they descended upon it like wolves. Iran tried to hold them back. "It will sicken you," he cried. "It will kill you." But his words were lost to the gnawing of teeth and the tearing of hands. They devoured the rotten flesh, coughing, gagging, but swallowing anyway. Sira turned away, clutching their son, her body shaking with disgust. Iran forced himself to take only a small strip, chewing slowly, ignoring the bile that rose in his throat. That night the tribe lay in a circle, writhing with sickness. Moans echoed through the dark, broken by the sound of vomiting. A boy did not rise the next morning. His mother screamed until her voice was nothing but rasping gasps. Still, they moved on. The plains grew darker, the air thicker, the ash deeper. The sun was a memory. The cold seeped into their bones. And as they walked, they began to hear things, whispers carried by the wind. At first, Iran thought it was madness, hunger twisting the mind, cold biting at reason, but then others heard it too. Faint voices, like the echo of their dead. The first to speak of it aloud was Lyra. "The ancestors walk with us," she whispered one night, her voice trembling. She sat hunched by the meager fire, her eyes gleaming like wet stones. "I hear them in the wind. They call us home." The others stirred uneasily. Children pressed closer to their mothers. Hunters glanced at Iran, searching his face for an answer. Their all night was still. When his eyes closed for just a heartbeat, he heard whispers threading through the air, a language he did not know yet understood. Promises, warnings, pleas, "Come deeper, come to the dark." That night, Sira clutched him close. "Iran," she murmured, "I hear them too." He pulled her tighter against his chest, staring into the flames. "Do not listen," he said. "Voices of the dead bring nothing but death." But the next day, the tribe's path grew twisted. A shadow moved along the horizon. At first, they thought it was smoke. Then it shifted, lengthened, grew sharper. It was something vast, moving across the plain with a speed no beast should possess. Fear rippled through the group. They huddled together, spears raised, though their arms shook from weakness. The shadow circled them, never close enough to reveal its form, but close enough for its presence to press against their hearts like a stone. Children cried. Hunters whispered prayers. Even Jarek's face went pale as bone. Then, without warning, the shadow vanished. But its absence was worse than its presence, because now every survivor knew the truth. They were not alone. That night no one slept. Every ear strained for whispers, every eye searched the dark. The fire sputtered and died, leaving them exposed to the blackness. And somewhere, beyond the edge of sight, something watched. Iran lay awake, his son against his chest, his wife trembling in his arms. His mind screamed for rest, but his body refused. He understood now. This was not just hunger, not just cold, not just ash. This land wanted them gone. And if the mountain had failed to destroy them, then something else would finish the work. The ash plains gave way to broken hills, jagged rocks jutting upward like the bones of a long-dead giant. The survivors dragged their weary bodies across the uneven ground, each step scraping raw skin, each breath a fight against the freezing air. It was in those hills that the wolves came. The first sign was silence. The wind stilled. The ash seemed to pause in the air. Iran noticed it instantly, the hair on his arms rising. He raised a hand to halt the group. The survivors stopped, their eyes wide, their breaths visible in the frigid gloom. Then came the sound. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the stones. Another joined it, then another. From the shadows between the rocks, pairs of glowing eyes appeared, yellow, unblinking, hungry. The tribe gasped. Children clutched their mothers. Hunters gripped spears, though their hands shook. "Wolves," Jarek muttered, his voice a mixture of awe and fear. "A pack." Iran counted quickly. 5, 6. Faintly, in the half-light. Iran pushed Sira and his son behind him. His grip tightened on his spear. "Stay together," he ordered. "Make fire if you can. Fire keeps them back." But their fire was nothing more than a memory. Their wood was gone, their strength too broken to build flames in time. The wolves lunged. Chaos erupted. One wolf darted forward, jaws snapping at a child's leg. A mother screamed, swinging a branch with desperate fury. Another wolf leapt at a hunter, dragging him to the ground. Blood sprayed across the stones as teeth tore into flesh. Iran roared, driving his spear into the beast's side. The wolf yelped, twisting, but another lunged at him from behind. He spun, kicking, his muscles burning with the last reserves of strength he didn't know he had. Sira shielded their son, clutching a rock in her hand, her eyes wide with terror and defiance. For every wolf they struck down, 2 more closed in. The circle tightened. The survivors screamed, fought, bled. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack stopped. The wolves pulled back, their eyes still burning in the dark, their breath misting. They stood watching, just beyond reach, as if amused. Iran's chest heaved. Blood trickled down his arm where teeth had grazed him. Around him, 3 of the tribe lay unmoving, their bodies broken and torn. The wolves had tested them, and the wolves would be back. They buried the dead in shallow graves among the stones, though the ground was too hard to dig deep. Ash covered their faces, their names spoken softly into the wind. That night, no one spoke around the faint ember of their fire. The silence was heavy, crushing, broken only by the distant howls echoing through the hills. But silence could not hold forever. "They are spirits," Lyra whispered suddenly. Her old eyes gleamed in the dark. "The wolves are not beasts. They are the dead, returned to hunt us." Murmurs rippled through the survivors. "Spirits," one of the women echoed. "Ghosts of those the mountain claimed." Iran's jaw tightened. "They are animals, nothing more." But doubt had already seeped into the tribe's bones. They had all seen the wolves vanish as though swallowed by shadow. They had all felt the unnatural pause before the attack. And then came the voices. Whispers in the night. Faint, drifting, carried on the wind, but louder now, more insistent. Some claimed to hear names, the voices of lost children, of dead lovers, of fallen hunters. Sira clutched Iran's arm. "I heard my brother," she whispered, trembling. "He called my name." Iran pulled her close, his face hard. It was only the wind. But he was lying. Because he too had heard it. A voice. By the 3rd night, madness began to fester. A young hunter named Varro stood abruptly by the fire, his face pale, his eyes wide. "My mother calls me," he said. His voice was flat, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "She waits in the dark." Before anyone could stop him, he dropped his spear and walked into the night. They shouted his name. They begged him to return, but he did not look back. And then the howls rose again. Screams followed. No one went after him. When morning came, all they found were tracks in the ash, ending in blood. The tribe moved on, but something inside them had broken. Wolves hunted them by night, ghosts haunted them by day. And Aaron knew the truth. The greatest danger was no longer hunger or beasts or cold. It was the crumbling of the human spirit. On the 7th day since the eruption, the ash plains gave way to a stretch of frozen earth. The wind was sharper here, carrying knives of ice that cut through skin and cloth. The survivors stumbled forward, their feet bleeding, their lips cracked and bleeding from the cold. It was then that they saw it. At first it looked like a mountain rising from the white haze, a dark, massive shape, half buried in snow and ash. As they drew closer, details emerged. Tusks like curved spears, a trunk frozen mid-swing, shaggy fur stiff with frost. A mammoth. Dead, but preserved by ice. Gasps rose from the survivors, their hollow eyes lit with a desperate, wild hope. Food. Yarek was the first to rush forward, his hands already grasping at the frozen hide. "Meat!" he cried, his voice breaking with hunger. "The gods have spared us!" Aaron hung back, his heart pounding. He knew what this meant. Sustenance, survival, but also danger. Dead beasts did not lie untouched for long. Something must have brought this mammoth down. But when he looked at his son, thin as bone and fading fast, he knew choice no longer existed. "Cut it open," Aaron ordered. "Take what we can." They fell upon the mammoth with stones and crude blades, hacking at the frozen flesh. The work was brutal, the meat stiff as rock, but desperation gave them strength. Steam rose as they pried chunks free, their breath mingling with the mammoth's death frost. When the first strip of meat hit the fire, the tribe leaned close, inhaling the greasy smoke with trembling anticipation. The children ate first, stuffing their mouths with steaming flesh, tears streaking their ash-stained faces. Then the hunters, tearing with their teeth, swallowing without chewing. Sira pressed a small piece into their son's hands, whispering words of comfort as he chewed weakly. For the first time in days, warmth spread through their bellies. For the first time in days, the cries of hunger quieted. But Aaron could not shake the beast, and something might return for its kill. That night, the tribe gathered around the fire, their bellies full for the first time since the mountain fell. Laughter, thin and fragile but real, rose into the cold air. For a moment they remembered what it felt like to be alive. But shadows lingered. Aaron sat apart, watching the dark beyond the firelight. The mammoth's carcass loomed in the distance, a hulking reminder of both fortune and danger. The wind carried strange scents, blood, smoke, and something else. Predators. The first howl shattered their fragile peace. Low, mournful, it rose across the ice. Another joined it, then another, until the night trembled with the chorus of wolves. The children cried. Mothers clutched them close. Hunters scrambled for spears. "They smell the meat," Jarek growled, rising to his feet. His eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Good, let them come. Tonight we feast like kings. Let the beasts feast on our spears." But Aaron knew better. Wolves did not challenge fire lightly. And yet, these did. From the shadows, eyes glowed, dozens of them. The pack that had hunted them before had grown, gathered, multiplied. They crept closer, circling, their movements synchronized, patient, merciless. The tribe formed a ring around the fire, spears raised, their voices trembling as they shouted into the night. The wolves waited. And then, without warning, they attacked. The circle shattered. Wolves leapt through the flames, snapping jaws closing around arms and legs. Screams pierced the night. Blood spattered the snow, steaming as it met the frozen ground. Aaron drove his spear into one wolf's chest, yanking it free to parry another. His muscles screamed, but he fought with the fury of a father protecting his child. Beside him, Sira swung a burning branch, driving back snapping jaws. Jarek roared like a madman, his spear thrusting, his teeth bared in savage joy. He laughed as wolves lunged, even as blood gushed from his arm. The battle raged until the fire collapsed into embers. Then, as suddenly as they had come, the wolves retreated, dragging with them two of the fallen. The survivors collapsed, gasping, bleeding, broken. Around them lay the bodies of 4 more tribe members, their lifeless eyes staring at the blackened sky. The feast had become a massacre. And as the survivors wept among the corpses, Aran looked at the mammoth's carcass and understood. The wolves had not killed the beast. Something else had. And whatever it was still out there. The survivors marched east until the ground dipped into a vast basin of white. Before them stretched a frozen river wide as a valley, its surface glittering faintly under the gray sky. Jagged cracks ran through the ice like veins, whispering of danger beneath. Perhaps life. But between them and that hope lay death. Jarek spat into the snow. "We cross," he said. "The forest is there. Food, firewood. If we stay here, the wolves will come again." "The ice is thin," Aran countered. "One wrong step and the river swallows us." Sira's voice was low, almost pleading. "If we don't try, we die here." The truth hung heavy in the air. There was no choice. Aran tested the ice with his spear. It groaned, but held. Slowly, cautiously, they stepped onto the frozen river. The surface shuddered beneath their weight. Cracks spidered outward, faint but growing. Children whimpered, clutching their mothers. The hunters spread out, trying to balance the strain. Halfway across, the wind rose. A long, mournful wail carried across the plains. The wolves had returned, their howls echoing like a funeral song. The tribe hurried, their steps frantic. The ice moaned, louder, protesting their haste. And then it happened. A sharp crack. A scream. The surface split beneath one of the hunters. He plunged into the black water, thrashing wildly. Ice shattered around him as he clawed for the edge, his cries filling the frozen air. Aran lunged forward, reaching for his hand, but the current was merciless. In a heartbeat, the man was gone, dragged beneath, swallowed whole. Panic erupted. People rushed, tripped, stumbled. Cracks spread like lightning. The river groaned, breaking beneath them. "Don't run!" Aran bellowed, his voice desperate. "Spread your weight! Move slow!" But fear had taken them, and fear is heavier than ice. The first hunter was only the beginning. As the tribe scattered across the ice, the river screamed beneath them. Sheets fractured, whole slabs tilting and breaking apart. Screams filled the air as men, women, and children plunged into the freezing black. The water swallowed them whole, pulling them under in seconds. Some resurfaced, their arms flailing, their mouths wide in silent cries as icy water strangled their lungs. Others vanished instantly, claimed without a trace. Aran clutched his son against his chest, one arm wrapped around Sira. He forced himself forward, his body low, crawling across the groaning surface. His heart hammered every crack beneath him like thunder in his skull. Behind him, Jarek bellowed like a mad beast, dragging 2 children by the arms. His legs plunged into freezing water, but he heaved himself out, roaring defiance at the river. "You will not have me!" he howled. But the river took more. A mother slipped, her hands clutching at ice until her nails tore away. Her child screamed as she disappeared beneath the surface. Aran lunged, but he was too far. The child's cries ended in a splash, then silence. Blood stained the ice where heads struck jagged edges. The white turned red, steaming faintly in the cold, staggered onto land. The forest loomed ahead, its black trees swaying in the wind. But none cheered, none wept. Their faces were hollow, their eyes dead. Sira clung to Aran, their son limp but breathing. Her lips trembled. "So many. Gone. Iran's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but all that came was silence. Behind them, the river groaned one last time and then stilled, as if satisfied with its feast. The wolves howled from the far bank, their voices triumphant. The tribe had crossed, but the river had taken its price in blood. The forest welcomed them with shadows. The trees were tall and skeletal, their trunks blackened with ash, their branches twisted into claws. Beneath them, the ground was damp, thick with rot. Every step sank into mud that clung to their legs like chains. But there was life here. Birds burst from the branches when they passed. Small tracks cut through the undergrowth. Deer, perhaps, or boar. For the first time in days, the air smelled not of ash and death, but of earth. Hope stirred among the survivors. Sira whispered to Iran, clutching their son close. "We might live here. We might build again." Iran wanted to believe her, but his instincts screamed caution. Forests offered food, yes, but also predators, and predators came in many forms. It was at dusk that they found the others. The survivors had stopped by a stream, kneeling to drink greedily from the icy water. Iran had just lifted a handful to his lips when he froze. Across the stream, eyes watched them. At first he thought they were animals, but then the figures stepped into view. Men. Thin, ragged, but alive. They held spears tipped with stone, their faces painted with ash and blood. Scars crisscrossed their arms and chests. Their eyes burned, not with fear, not with hope, but with hunger. One of them barked a word Iran did not understand. Another pounded his spear into the ground, snarling like a wolf. The air turned sharp. Yarek rose slowly, spear in hand. "Another tribe," he muttered, "but they look half mad." "They are like us," Sira whispered. "Survivors." Iran shook his head. "No. Look at their eyes. These were not survivors. These were predators." The strangers crossed the stream, their movements slow but deliberate. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar down his cheek, raised his spear toward the survivors. He spoke again, his voice harsh, guttural. Iran understood enough. It was not a greeting. It was a demand. "Give us your food, give us your fire, or die." The tension cracked like ice underfoot. Yarek stepped forward, baring his teeth. "We will not kneel!" he roared. He slammed his spear against the earth, the sound echoing through. The first blows fell. Iran shoved Sira and their son behind him. His spear met another, the clash jarring through his bones. He twisted, driving the shaft into his attacker's chest. The man fell with a gurgle, blood spraying across the mud. But there were too many. Yarek fought like a beast, roaring with every strike. He caught one stranger's spear with his bare hand, yanked it free, and smashed the man's skull with the butt. Blood and ash streaked his face, but he laughed, wild with fury. The battle was brutal, primal. Spears clashed, rocks smashed skulls, teeth tore into flesh. Screams filled the air, mingling with the cries of ravens circling above. Iran's heart thundered as he fought. Every swing, every thrust was not for him. It was for Sira, for his son. He could not die. He would not. The scarred leader came for him, his spear aimed at Iran's heart. Iran barely parried, the force driving him to his knees. The man loomed over him, teeth bared, eyes blazing. Then Yarek struck. With a roar, he tackled the man, driving him into the mud. They grappled like animals, snarling, clawing, biting. Yarek's hands closed around the man's throat, squeezing until the scarred face turned purple. With a final twist, the stranger went limp. The battle stilled. The survivors stood panting among the bodies. 4 of the strangers lay dead. 2 more fled into the forest, their screams fading. But the cost had been heavy. 2 of their own lay motionless, their blood soaking into the mud. One was a young mother. Her child wailed beside her corpse until Sira gathered him into her arms, tears streaking her ash-stained face. Iran's chest heaved as he looked at the bodies around them. Not beasts, not ghosts, not wolves, men. They had killed their own kind, and in the flickering light of the fire they built that night, Iran wondered which was worse, to be hunted by wolves or to be hunted by men. The forest gave them wood. For the first time since the mountain's wrath, they built a real fire, tall, crackling, bright against the endless night. Its warmth spread into their bones. Its light banished the shadows that had stalked them across the plains. The survivors gathered around it, their eyes wide with something close to awe. For children who had only known ash and cold, the fire looked like a piece of the sun itself. Sira sat close, her son curled in her lap, the flames painting her face in gold. Iran watched her, the sight filling his chest with something fierce, something unbreakable. For this, just this moment of light, he would fight the whole world. But fire was fragile. The storm winds rose that night, rattling the branches above. Ash fell in soft flurries, threatening to smother the embers. Iran and Yarek took turns shielding the flame, feeding it with twigs gleamed with something else. Obsession. He stared at the flame like a starving man stares at meat. "It is ours," he muttered. "No one takes it from us." But fire, like hope, was never safe for long. On the second night, the storm howled with greater fury. The flames sputtered, shrinking beneath gusts that tore at the camp. Sparks flew, scattered into the mud. Children screamed as the fire faltered. Panic spread like disease. "Keep it alive!" Iran roared, throwing himself to his knees, shielding the embers with his body. His hair singed, his skin burned, but he did not move. "Feed it, now!" The tribe obeyed, frantic. Sticks, bark, even scraps of cloth were thrown into the pit. Slowly, painfully, the fire caught again, climbing upward, reclaiming its strength. They cheered, weakly, relief washing over them. But Iran saw the truth in their eyes. The fire had become more than warmth, more than light. It was faith. It was survival itself. And faith, this fragile, was dangerous. The following days revolved around the fire. They moved through the forest, carrying a torch at all times, guarding it like a sacred relic. When they stopped, they rebuilt the flame, feeding it, tending it, whispering prayers into its smoke. One night, Lyra, the old woman, rose and declared herself its keeper. "The gods live in the fire," she rasped. "As long as it burns, they walk with us. If it dies, so do we." Some nodded, their faces hollow, but believing. Others glanced at Iran, waiting for him to refute her. But he said nothing, because deep down, he feared she was right. The fire became a source of power. Whoever tended it was obeyed. Whoever threatened it was hated. When a boy stumbled and nearly kicked embers onto the ground, Yarek struck him across the face. "Careless child!" he bellowed. "Do you want us all dead?" The boy sobbed, clutching his cheek while his mother cowered in silence. Iran confronted Yarek later, his voice low. "He is only a child." "He is weakness," Yarek spat. "Weakness kills fire, and without fire, we die." The tension between them burned hotter than the flames themselves. On the fourth night, the storm returned, fiercer than before. The fire roared and hissed, sparks flying into the black. Branches fell from the trees, crushing shelters, scattering the survivors into chaos. And then it happened. The wind swallowed the flame. The fire died. Screams filled the camp. People wailed, tearing at their hair, collapsing into the mud. Lyra shrieked that the gods had abandoned them. Yarek roared in fury, smashing his fists against the ground. Iran stood frozen, staring at the blackened pit where light had been. His chest felt hollow, his mind numb. Sira's voice broke the silence, feeding it with dry bark. Slowly, Painfully, a spark became a flame. A flame became fire. The survivors gasped, tears streaking their faces. The fire lived, but Aaron knew then that he was bound. He had become its keeper, its protector. The flame had chosen him, and as he stared into its light, he realized fire did not only give life, it demanded sacrifice. The forest grew thicker as they pressed on, but instead of comfort, the trees closed around them like prison bars. The canopy blocked even the faintest glow of the sky, leaving them trapped in eternal dusk. The fire went with them, always burning, always consuming. Wood grew harder to find, forcing them to strip bark, break branches, tear apart their own shelters. Still they fed it, terrified of letting it die. But hunger gnawed at them, worse than wolves. The meat from the mammoth was gone, the forest game elusive. They set traps but caught nothing. Roots they dug from the soil were bitter, sometimes poisonous. Children whimpered through the night. Men grew hollow-eyed and silent. It was then that the voices returned. Whispers drifted through the trees, low and insistent. At first, Aaron thought it was the wind, but then he heard words. Names. His name. Aaron, you cannot save them. Let them go. Sira heard them too. She clutched his arm, trembling. My brother calls again. He says he waits in the shadows. Do not listen, Aaron said, but his voice lacked conviction, because he too felt the pull, the strange comfort in the whispers. The others began to change. One night a hunter rose silently, his eyes distant. Without a word he walked into the forest. They called after him, begged him to return, but he did not look back. His screams echoed hours later. The next night, it happened again. Another left, claiming her dead husband waited for her. She too was swallowed by the dark. The survivors dwindled not by hunger or beasts, but by their own minds unraveling. Aaron sat by the fire, clutching his son to his chest, staring into the flames until his vision blurred. He whispered to himself, to the fire, to anyone who would listen. I will not leave. I will not give him to the dark. But the night was long, and the whispers were patient. The storm came without warning. Winds shrieked through the forest, tearing branches from trees, flinging ash and ice like daggers. The fire sputtered, bent low, almost dying, his body gaunt but his eyes blazing. This is madness, he spat. We starve, we freeze, we die, and still we worship the flame like slaves. He kicked at the fire pit, sending sparks flying. Gasps rose from the others. Sira clutched their son, her face pale with terror. Aaron stood slowly, his heart pounding. Stop! Yerrick turned, his lips curling. You would choose fire over life? You would let it consume us until nothing remains? Aaron's hand tightened on his spear. Without fire, we are already dead. The air cracked with silence. Then Yerrick lunged. The two men collided in a fury of fists and stone. They grappled beside the fire, their bodies crashing into the mud, their snarls echoing like beasts. The tribe cried out, torn between fear and awe, watching their strongest tear each other apart. Yerrick's hands closed around Aaron's throat, squeezing. Aaron gasped, clawing, his vision dimming. The fire crackled beside them, hungry, waiting. With a roar, Aaron drove his knee into Yerrick's chest, tearing free. He seized a burning branch from the pit and swung, The wood struck Yerek's face, searing flesh, filling the air with the stench of burning skin. Yerek screamed, stumbling back, clutching his eye. He fell into the mud, writhing, half-blind. Irin stood over him, the branch raised, ready to strike again. His son's cries pierced the air. Sira's voice begged his name for a heartbeat. Irin considered it, ending Yerek, silencing him forever. But he lowered the branch. "Leave him," Irin rasped. "If he rises again, the fire will finish what I will not." The survivors stared in silence, the firelight flickering across their hollow faces. That night, no one slept. Yerek lay half-blind and seething. The others sat in a circle, their gazes fixed on Irin, on the flame, on the fragile thread that bound them all. And Irin knew the truth. This was the end of them. The tribe was breaking, and only dawn or death would decide what remained. The storm passed, but it left the survivors shattered. Only 5 remained: Irin, Sira, their son, the old woman Lyra, and Yerek, half-blind, scarred, but alive. They no longer spoke as a tribe. They were fragments of something broken, held together by the fragile flame that still burned in their pit. The night was long, colder than any before. The trees stood silent, the air heavy. Even the wolves had gone, leaving only echoes of their howls. Lyra rocked back and forth, whispering to the fire. "The gods wait for us in the smoke," she murmured. "They whisper of an ending. They whisper of a new dawn." Sira clutched their son, humming softly, her voice shaking with exhaustion. The boy's eyes fluttered, his breath shallow. Irin sat guard, his spear across his knees, his gaze fixed on the dark beyond the fire. He dared not sleep. He dared not blink. Yerek lay apart, his wounded eye covered in ash, his good words no one could understand. Hours dragged like years. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing from every tree. They called names. They promised warmth. They promised release. Iran clenched his jaw, forcing himself to ignore them, but his son stirred, his lips parting. "Papa? The voices?" His small hand lifted, reaching toward the dark. Iran crushed it in his own, tears burning his eyes. "No," he whispered. "Stay with me. Stay here. Stay alive." The boy wept softly, his face pressed into Iran's chest, and in that moment, Iran knew. If dawn came, it would not come for all of them. The first hint of dawn came as a faint glow on the horizon, pale and fragile. For weeks the sun had been hidden behind ash and storm, but now a thin blade of gold pierced the black, cutting across the forest. The survivors stared, silent, awestruck. Iran's chest ached. It was real. The sun still lived. But then Yerek rose. His face was twisted, his breath ragged. "No," he snarled. "The fire is ours. It is mine. You will not take it from me." He lunged for the pit, his hands reaching to seize the flame. Iran moved instinctively. He met Yerek in the center, their bodies colliding, fists striking, teeth bared. The fire flared between them, scattering sparks into the dawn. They grappled in the mud, snarling like beasts. Yerek's strength was monstrous, born of fury and madness. He slammed Iran into the ground, his hand closing around his throat. "Let it die," Yerek roared, spittle flying. "Let the fire die." Iran gasped, vision blurring. His son's cry echoed in his ears. Sira's scream tore through the air. With a desperate surge, Iran seized a burning branch and drove it upward. The wood plunged into Yerek's chest, embedding deep. The man froze, his one good eye widening. Smoke curled from the wound as the fire consumed him. He fell back, his body writhing, then stilled. Silence. Only the crackle of fire remained. Iran collapsed to his knees, gasping, trembling. His hands shook as he fed the branch back into the pit, keeping the flame alive. Sira rushed to him, their son in her arms, tears streaking her face. Lyra knelt beside them, her old voice breaking. "It is done. The gods have chosen. The fire lives." And then, light. The sun broke fully across the horizon, spilling gold through the trees. The forest glowed, the air warmed, the whispers faded, swallowed by dawn. The survivors wept openly, their faces not end.